Good afternoon. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of September 23rd, 2020. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Josh Whitehead serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Whitehead, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Jackson.
Here.
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Here.
Ms. Baker.
Here.
Ms. Scarlock. Did we unmute her? I'll come back to Ms. Scarlock. Mr. Malazari.
Here.
And Mr. Chairman.
Here.
Ms.
And Ms.
Dodd
Dodd.
here.
Yes.
Yes. Present.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established
Mr. Chairman?
in 1920. Yes, sir.
If I may interrupt for a second, I believe one of the only people unmuted right now are the board members, and there's two ways to mute. There's from our end and there's from your end. I think one of you has a small child. So if the one of you with the small child, if you could mute yourself, and then we'll be ready. And I'm also getting a lot of feedback, maybe from someone in addition to the person with the small child. Am I
maybe someone in a pet? It sounds like a pet store, like a parakeet.
Okay. If anyone is on a secondary call and or with children, can you please mute yourself? And also mute your YouTube video, because it's just, if you're on the call, it's just serving purposes for a visual. Could that be from our end? No. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I am going to do something unorthodox. I am going to individually mute our
you're
board
going to do
members.
your own little investigation to see who that noise is coming from.
Yeah, and then we'll just
That makes sense.
open it up to the group when need be.
Okay.
And I'm doing that slowly here. And it may be us here at City Hall.
Yeah, it could be that no one's where they can hear it, but we're all, somehow there's some interference somewhere.
Okay. That was, okay. Well, we took roll. What we'll do is we'll unmute. Mr. Chairman, you're unmuted.
Correct.
And Portia's here for the record. Thank you, Jeffrey. So as we open it back up to the floor, we'll unmute everybody, but just to get through some of our opening speeches,
Okay.
we've muted everyone so we don't have that interference. So back to you,
Very
Mr.
good.
Chairman.
Okay, thank you. This board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I would like to swear in the staff. You may all remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, thank you. May I get a motion from someone on the board to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
And thank you.
Okay,
And
I hear
was,
that sound like Miss Savage Towns.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and then is there, so being moved, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, being moved and
Thank you.
second, is there any discussion on the minutes from last month's meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving last month's meeting signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Secretary, if you could give us a Secretary's report for if there is one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. As far as the Secretary's report, I was going to cover item. Let me make one alteration on my switchboard. Okay. One comment under Secretary's report, and that is agenda item number 1. I think we the body kind of went down this road a couple months ago when it appeared that Governor Lee would not extend the allowance for telephonic or digital public meetings. And in that conversation, I think there's at least a quorum, if not a super duper majority of this body that would, at the earliest time practicable, go back to in-person meetings. And basically what we're waiting for is for the council chambers downstairs to be complete. The committee room, as you recall, is pretty small to allow both social distancing of members of the body and for members of the public. With that said, however, this most recent executive order from Governor Lee required that a body that is interested in continuing telephonic meetings through the months of September and October adopt a resolution finding that doing so was necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of their jurisdiction. So that's a little explanation of item number 1. Obviously, if we want to discuss it further, we can do that in a moment, but I was planning on placing that resolution on the consent calendar. As far as procedure, the procedure for this meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case that's listed on the agenda. Agendas are found on our YouTube channel and on the Board of Adjustments homepage. For each case, staff with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation that contains site plans, photographs, and maps of the subject property. At the conclusion of the staff presentation, the applicant will present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, the board will hear first from those speakers in support of that application, followed by speakers in opposition of the application. Under our rules of procedure, the applicant plus supporters have a total of 10 minutes, and the opposition has a total of 10 minutes. Following that, the applicant is given a 2-minute rebuttal period. And these times do not reflect an allowance for additional time for Q&A between members of the board and the speakers. After all speakers are heard, the body will then close the public hearing portion of the meeting, deliberate, and then vote. All motions by the board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also hold a case for no longer than 90 days. And what we've started doing, Mr. Chairman, on our agenda is noting on our held cases how long and how close to the 90-day limitation some of these cases are. If a member of the body would like to hear additional testimony, he or she may do so, but the motion to do so, to reopen the public hearing, requires a 2/3 vote. At that point, we will ensure that both sides are heard from for an equal amount of time. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis-Shelby County Unified Development Code, which was adopted by the City Council and the County Commission in 2010. I'll introduce the entire UDC, that code, to make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. This body is vested with the power to act on these cases before it under Chapter 922 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all other notice requirements have been fulfilled in accordance with the UDC.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish a consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the staff or a board member objects to the case being placed on consent, he or she should do so by stating so at the time the Secretary reads that case. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole, will not hold individual public hearings on each case. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda today are eligible to be placed on consent?
And again, to reiterate, Mr. Chairman, if a member of the board would like to hear a full hearing, or at least from staff on one of these cases, he or she can do so as we call these out, or at the very end when a motion is made. So we discussed item number 1. That's a resolution of the Board of Adjustment that continuation of meeting telephonically, at least through the month of October, is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Memphis and Shelby County in lieu of the COVID-19 outbreak. Agenda item number 2, we will hear. Agenda item number 3, that's docket BOA 2059, located at 1502 Harbert. The applicant is Jared Bingham. The use district is the R6 Historic District, and the request is a variance from Section 276 to allow a swimming pool to encroach into the side yard setback. A note to the body, if you recall, this case has been held at Brookfield, represented by David Wade. The appellant are Robert and Sharon Chimenti, represented by Jack Heflin. Use district is the R10 Residential Single Family District, and the request is an appeal of the Division of Planning and Development with regard to an accessory structure. And Mr. Chairman, as I mentioned last month, there is a concurrent appeal or action in Chancery Court right now, and it has been reported to me that the both sides are close to an agreement and would like that agreement to be memorialized with Chancery Court. And if that is the case, by next month, this may very well be a withdrawn case. That brings us to our new cases, agenda item number 7. So that would be a consent as a hold. Sorry, number 6. Agenda item number 7 is docket BOA 2081. That's located at 331 North McElroy. The applicant is Jennifer Johnson, represented by Douglas Leininger. The use district is the R6 Single Family District, and the request is a variance pursuant to subsection 329F to allow a house to encroach into a platted front yard setback. And that would be a consent as approval. Item number 8, which is docket BOA 2082, located at 1481 Hester. The applicant is the Shelby County Board of Education, represented by Jim Williams. The use district is the R10 Single Family District, and the request is a variance from sub-item 496E2HI to allow an electronic message board on a street that is classified as neither an arterial or collector. And Mr. Chairman, the applicant has requested an additional condition number 4 that would read the requirement for irrigation, or if not irrigated, a reduction of sign area required pursuant to paragraph 496M3 and sub-item 497D2P12 of the Unified Development Code shall not be required. This was similar to a similar friendly amendment on previous sign requests. And Mr. Chairman, as we get to agenda, and that would be item 8 is a consent as approval with a friendly amendment. And as we get to item number 9, I'm looking in Mr. Jeffrey Penzis' direction. Is our opposition on number 9 in attendance? And as we do that, how about this? We will go through the agenda. I'm going to go through all the way through the end, and I'm going to ask you that again, Mr. Penzis. And if not, if she is still not here, or if he's still not here, we'll consider placing it on the consent. Agenda item number 10, and we'll come back to 9, Mr. Chairman. 10 is docket BOA 2084, located at 726 North Parkway. That's at the northwest corner of North Parkway and Manassas. The applicants are Monroe and Joanne Ballard. The use district is the MU zoning district within the Uptown Special Purpose District, and the variance is from subsection 392H to allow a street-facing garage. Agenda item number 11, that's docket BOA 2087, located at 4971 Minden. The applicants are John and Jamie Wilson. The use district is the R10 Single Family Residential District, and the request is a variance pursuant to subsection 329F to allow a house to encroach into a platted front yard setback. Agenda item number 12, that's docket BOA 2088, located at 1760 Vinton. The applicant is Kelly Townsend Revocable Trust. The representative is Jay Humphreys. The use district is the R6 single-family district within a historic overlay, and the request is a variance from subsection 361A to allow the expansion of an existing garage that will encroach into the required rear and side yard setbacks. Agenda item number 13, that's docket BOA 2089, located at 590 Washington at the northeast corner of Washington and High Street. The applicant is Hospitality Hub and Jared Bingham, represented by Kate Gates. The use districts are the CBD, Central Business District, and the RU4, Multifamily Residential 4, and the request is a use variance from 252 to allow a social service institution. Agenda item number 14 is docket BOA 2090, located at 2701 Union Extended. The applicant is Amin Zaki, represented by Tim McCaskill. The use districts are the CMU3 Commercial and EMP Light Industrial Districts, and the request is a use variance from section 252 to allow multifamily housing. And Mr. Chairman, if we're going to go back to item number 9, Mr. Penzis says the opposition is not here, so if a board member does not object, it can be consent as a hold. That is, again, agenda item number 9, docket BOA 2083, located at 4350 Chuck. The applicant is the Shelby County Board of Education, represented by Jim Williams. The use district is the R6 district. The variance request is from sub-item 496E2HI to allow an electronic message board on a street that is classified as neither an arterial or collector. And like agenda item number 8, a requested additional condition number 4 has been agreed upon by staff. And I won't reread that, but make a note that item 9 would be approval as amended. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll give the floor back over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Does any member of the board have a problem with any of those cases being placed on consent? Right now, the only one that we would have to hear is agenda item number 2.
Mr. Chairman, Mary Baker.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question about a case without pulling it off the agenda?
Sure, absolutely.
All right, I actually have questions on a couple of them. Number 3, was there an agreement there between Central Gardens and this applicant? Because, they were, I think Shelley Rainwater was here last time, and so I'm just wondering, did they reach an agreement, or do you know?
Mr. Chairman, I'm about to turn the floor over to Mr. Bacchus, who is our case manager, but I will tell you we did not have a request from her to speak. Now, omission sometimes is not the same as commission, so Mr. Bacchus, did you hear Ms. Baker's question?
Thank you, Mr. Zoning Administrator. I was listening in. I did hear her question. I believe there's been no agreement between the two parties. However, we did not hear any response from Central Gardens Historic District representative.
Were they re-notified?
Oh, yes.
Question. Did they notice again? They did?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I have another question. Can I move on to my next question?
Yes, ma'am.
Number 10. It looks like that garage faces Manassas. Is that right, or proposed garage? Faces Manassas, not North Parkway. Is that right? It's item number 10.
I'm looking
I'm going to unmute. Rather than me stumble around, that is Seth Thomas. Is Seth on the line, Mr. Penzis?
Hi, sorry, this is Staff Planner Seth Thomas. I believe the garage is going to be facing Manassas.
I was looking at that, at the photos that you have in there of that site, and there's a storm drain inlet there, isn't there, and a utility pole, and so I'm just wondering, is there enough room to get that curb cut in there for that front-facing garage? Didn't look like it was to me.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, but engineering never sent those comments out, so I was under the assumption that they were good to go.
Boy, I just wonder if it might be worth making sure about that. Take a look at those pictures and see what you think. Some of the other board members, if you have that staff report handy, it might be worth holding it until we can make sure there's enough room for it. So I'll just.
So do you want to hold it, or just let them? My thought is we're just saying they can have a house there. As far as the driveway, that's for them and the curb cut people to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Like it does make sense what you're saying, but I just don't know if that matters to me on my vote.
Well, I mean, to me, I wouldn't want to see a front-facing garage on the parkway, and the site plan shows one on Manassas, and it's in the site plan. I mean, whatever the other board members want to do, I just looked at the site plan and the conditions, and to me it looked like the site plan could not be implemented.
We may need to just hear the case then. I don't think we can add any sort of condition on consent to not ever have something load on North Parkway. So if you want to add that, we'd need to hear it.
Oh, well, okay. I think it's important, but if none of the other board members do,
Mr. Jackson, did you say something?
No, I unmuted, but I agree with Ms. I think we ought to just hear the case and put a condition on it.
Okay, that sounds good. So that was, and again, give me that case number. I have it open. I need to go back to the top.
Number 10.
Number 10. Okay, got it.
Okay, I have
Any other questions?
One other question, and then I'm done. Number 14. So it's being allowed for multifamily uses, but the other uses in the district are permitted. Is that? Can you do that? I'm just asking. That looked unusual to me, and that's all I'll say. I just wanted to say something about it because it looked unusual to me that you would approve a use variation for a building, but then the existing zoning would continue to apply. So that's it. That's all I want to do.
Mr. Whitehead, do you have a response to that question?
What was the question again? I'm sorry.
I think that I'll restate it, Mary, and then tell me the way I understood it, that we're approving a use variance, but we're retaining all the existing zoning. Is that right, Mary?
Allowing all the uses that are still permitted there, but we're approving a use variance for multifamily. That seems unusual to me. I mean, it would be like saying that my house was approved for industrial, but you can still have a house. You know what I mean? It just seems that it should be either apples or oranges. I'm not willing to pull it off to have a discussion about it, but I just wanted to point it out that there's a question in my mind about this particular case, I guess you would say.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, when this body approves any variance, but including use variances, that does not force the applicant to, at some point decide he or she does not want to utilize this body's approval. I think probably the most frequent example is someone gets a variance from a setback encroachment, let's say, and then for whatever reason they decide they don't need that setback variance. They're just going to build in line with the UDC. Obviously, that is still permissible. A good example with the use variances is we had a lot of use variances in the 60s and 70s for apartment complexes that went to this body. And the Planning Commission would typically, after the fact, clean up the zoning map and then rezone those properties that had been given a variance by the Board of Adjustment and upzone them, for lack of a better word, to the multifamily districts. And this often comes up like maybe on a weekly basis. Does the Board of Adjustment variance and those conditions still apply if the property has now been upzoned? And the answer to that is no. Conversely, if you get any kind of use variance, you know, it doesn't erase the zoning unless, like I said, there's a post-variance approval cleanup to the map. So if for some reason this developer decides not to convert the building to apartments or does so, he could always change his mind, whether that's tomorrow or 40 years, and revert back to the underlying zoning, which of course is subject to change, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The only comment that I want to make in addition is, to me, the staff report sounded like he could have them all at the same time, not decide he doesn't want to use them and then go back to what is permitted. I fully agree that he can do that, but to me it sounded like he could have them all at the same time. So anyway, that's my comment on it. I just wanted to make a comment. I didn't want to have it passed without making a comment on it.
And that would not be that's not what we, even if it is what we meant, that's not what I interpret. How about that? That's from the zoning administrator.
You're telling me that this will be corrected when you approve the site plan and to send to be.
Yeah, for these cases, you know, it's really that notice of disposition, those conditions that apply, and you know, if there's something questionable in the staff report, then.
Okay, awesome.
Disregard it.
Thank you.
Very good. And then, Mr. Whitehead, I'm assuming that the opposition for number 9 still has not joined us?
Is that true, Mr. Penzis? That is correct. And while I have the floor, Mr. Seth Thomas, can you, or you're about to present on item number 2, but could you ask Teresa or Chip, who should be in earshot of you, that we need your applicant on number 10 to call in, because Mr. Penzis says he's not here. So there's your instructions, Mr. Thomas. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think we have the consent agenda that contains everything except for items 2 and 10.
Correct. So I'm going to ask the board if someone would make a motion on the consent agenda for case number, or item number 1 as approval, 3 is approval, 4 is a hold, 5 is a hold, 6 is a hold, 7 is approval, 8 and 9 both is approval with the friendly conditions added, 11 is approval, 12 is approval, 13 is approval, and 14 is approval.
So moved.
Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Perfect. Being moved and seconded, I'll remind the board that by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that he or she has read the staff report and is in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Ms. Doss?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson? Oh, I'm sorry. We had feedback on Mr. Jackson. We did him wrong. We muted him, and now we're calling out for him. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Malazri?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage-Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Ms. Gerlach?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
That's 7 ayes.
Okay, very good. Those cases, basically, if you are here for cases any case other than 2 and 10, you have been either approved or held as requested. So we're now, I guess, Mr. Shaker, we're about to hear agenda item number 2. And before you call that out, I'm going to go ahead and recuse myself and turn the floor or the board over to Ms. Savage Towns, our vice chair.
All right,
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not sure who the Mr. Secretary. Do we have the applicant, and is there any opposition to this case?
Yes, ma'am. We do have an applicant and a representative, and then at least 2 or 3 people in opposition. So as we prepare to unmute them, we can go straight to Mr. Thomas for a staff report.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, good afternoon, board members. I was a staff planner on this case, known as BOA 2043. The location is southeast corner of Broad and Hollywood. Owner is Reconnect Memphis LLC. The representative is Jason Jackson. Their request is a use variance from section 2.52 to allow accessory uses for a gas station to be located within the R6H historic district. Next slide, please.
That's okay. I can give you the information if you need, whatever you need.
We can see here that the this particular variance is for the little lot that extends eastwards along Sam Cooper. The current structure is within a commercial district. However, this strip of grass that you see on the aerial is within the R6 district. And here's the zoning map that sort of shows that. If we go to the next slide, we can see sort of the land use that surrounds this site is majority commercial with some industrial and also vacant land. The next slide will show some site photos. The one on the left shows the view of the subject property from Sam Cooper facing north. You can see the abandoned building along with the billboard that currently sits on the lot. And you can also see that from the picture to the right that shows the intersection of Sam Cooper and North Hollywood. Next slide, please. And the next slide here shows the subject property and billboard from Broad Avenue. And next slide, please. And then these next 2 site photos show the protected bike lane and curb bump out for the bike lane that runs along Broad Avenue. The next slide is just a example of some of the architectural things that are in the surrounding area along the Broad Avenue Arch District. And then we'll get into the site plan. So this before you right here is the original site plan that shows sort of the building being more to the east of the property, and it currently shows 5 pumps, with only one of the pumps being located within the CMU1 district. The other 4 are located within that R6H, which is the reason we're here today. However, there's been a revised site plan, if you go to the next slide, that shows that the convenience store is going to be fronting right up at the corner of Hollywood and Broad Avenue. And it still shows the 5 pumps. However, one of those pumps has been redacted, so there will only be 4 pumps in the overall site plan. That was done for some alley access that we'll get into later. Go to the next slide, please. So this just shows that exact same thing with a little example of sort of the aerial of what that's going to look like, what the development will look like. And the next 2 slides also sort of give perspective to the renderings that were provided by the applicant. This from an aerial from Broad Avenue, and the next more of a street view of sort of this market with a little area for seating. So getting into the zoning history of this site, if we go to the next slide. This is in the Midtown Corridor East Redevelopment Project Program. And then when Sam Cooper was completed and open to traffic, we sort of see the relocation or the zoning history of this area. And if we go to the next slide, we'll see that the Midtown Corridor East Binghamton Comprehensive Rezoning Plan was what divided this particular parcel between the CMU1 zoning that has the current vacant building on it and the rezoning from RS15 to RS6, now known as R6, which is also incorporated into the southern part of, or the northernmost part of the Lee Woods Historic District. If you go to the next slide, just shows some the Broad Avenue Corridor Planning Initiative, some of the things that are looked for in developments that take place within this particular district of the city. And then if we go to the next slide, we'll get into relevant UDC clauses. So the minimum front and side setbacks of 20 feet in subsection 3.1a may be reduced. That will come in with one of the conditions. And also, more importantly, this is since the R6 portion is within the Lee Woods Historic District, if it were to pass tomorrow, on Thursday, October the 24th, it will require action by the Landmarks Commission to officially approve this project. So if we get into the findings of fact, on the next slide, the southern portion of the site, zoned R6, is an irregularly shaped lot and is directly adjacent to Sam Cooper. This particular zoning doesn't reflect the existing condition of that area on the north side of Sam Cooper. And additionally, the southern portion of the site is 305 feet away from the closest single-family home within the Lee Woods Historic Conservation District. The irregular shape of the lot size and the existing adjacent land uses are the cause of the practical difficulty or hardship. Furthermore, as far as the use variance is concerned, single-family homes are not really practical at this lot location. If we go to the consistency with Memphis 3.0, this is within the future land use categories of commercial CMU1, and it is in the degree of change accelerate. And if we go to the conclusions here, so the applicant is seeking relief from Section 5.2 to allow uses for a gas station. Although the convenience store with sales is permitted by right in the CMU1 portion of the site, the R6 zoning of the site where the pumps will be located is not zoned CMU1, which is the reason for this variance. The guiding principles from the Broad Avenue Corridor Planning Initiative include limiting curb cuts and providing a pedestrian-friendly environment. The building fronts on Broad and Hollywood, the design and sale are compatible with the adjacent structures. There was a lot of work done in engineering to sort of clean up the curb cuts. Currently, Broad Avenue, the curb cut on Broad Avenue is a right out only, and the curb cut was moved east, and another island was proposed to be added to protect the bike lane and that curb bump out that one of the entrances to the site will be going through. So if we go to the next slide, the staff is recommending approval with conditions, and the conditions are as follows. The curb cut on Broad Avenue shall be a right out only. And a freestanding sign shall be installed on the eastern side of Broad Avenue. The curb cut alerting drivers to watch for cyclists and pedestrians. The curb cut on Hollywood shall be a right-in only as well. No traffic will be permitted to exit the site onto Hollywood. The existing off-premise sign shall be removed. We'll keep the same sort of trees that are in the area. We need to see bicycle parking on the site plan. And then if the final elevations of Hollywood and Broad do not meet the reduced setbacks, we will need a new variance request for section 3.10.2B1, which was mentioned earlier. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions from the Board of Staff? Hearing none. All right, Mr. Applicant, do you have anything additional or anything to add to what staff has said? Is that Mr. Staff?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hello. This is Jason Jackson, and I'm representing the applicant today.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You have anything further to add or that you wanted to explain?
Oh, is this the time to make our opening statement, or?
This is in support, if you're the applicant, in support of the application, or if you have anything to add to what staff has presented.
Okay. No, I think Seth has done a great job. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the board of Mr. Jackson? No, hearing no questions, I guess we'll go on. Mr. Secretary, are we ready for opposition?
Yes, let's do this. Mr. Penzis, do we have a few people on the side of quote-unquote support? I think most of them are probably part of the buyer or seller's team. Are they all unmuted? Okay. Well, I would just, before we go to the other side, I just want to put this call out to anybody on the line in support. Speak now, because when we come back to y'all, it'll just be technically the rebuttal period. Okay.
Well, then, yeah, I guess I will make a quick statement, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And state your name for us. Name and
Jason
address.
Jackson, 1264 Yorkshire Drive.
Okay, and if you don't mind raising your hand, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay. Go ahead and proceed.
Yeah, so, there's been a lot of emotion surrounding this proposed development, and I know we have several folks with opposition on the call today that have a decent amount they'd like to say, so I'll keep it pretty short. But I do want to say thank you to Seth. I think that was a good overview of the conditions of the site, the plan, and the variance request. And I also want to thank really quickly the Office of Planning and Development, City Engineering, and the Tennessee Department of Transportation for their time and efforts over really the last year, but specifically over the last 3 months, just going out of the way to meet with the team on the site and meeting with stakeholders in the neighborhood to really, what Seth had shown, the kind of change from that first site plan to the one that we're presenting today and requesting a variance for. That was a lot of input from a lot of folks. So we really appreciate their time. And we are in agreement with the recommendation for approval and the associated conditions. Interestingly enough, the site started out as Adams Brothers Filling Station and Garage in 1936 before it became the muffler shop. And I think that's the original 92-year-old building that sits dilapidated on the site with the billboard today. I can tell you the applicant didn't come to this concept quickly. As for the better part of a decade, they really tried with very little success in utilizing the property with a variety of uses. Seth indicated in the staff report that the site's flanked on one side by a 7-lane urban highway. The other side is the primary bicycle corridor through the city. Public alley terminates at the center of this site, and there are semi-truck deliveries to the adjacent business that take place through this lot, all of which really drastically limit the potential uses, let alone the separate zoning. So, this concept is really, it's for a neighborhood market and multimodal filling station that's really to be unique to this particular site and this context. The applicant sees this as an opportunity to eliminate blight and the billboard and create a beautiful, unique, artistic entrance to the Arts District while acting as a pit stop for the folks that are cycling on the half line or walking on the half line. So again, we really appreciate the board's time and consideration of this variance request today, and thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Are there any further questions for the applicant in support of this BOA project? Okay. Mr. Secretary, are we ready for our opposition?
Yes, ma'am. I believe the first person is on the line is Paul West. Mr. West?
Okay. Mr. West, would you give your name and address for the record, please?
I'm Paul West, 6003 Manor Cove in Memphis.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God with your hand lifted?
I do.
All right. Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. I'm Paul West. I'm president of West Memorials on 2481 Broad Avenue. I'm next door to the property being discussed today, and I am pleading with you to vote against granting a variance that will allow a gas station. We were one of the first businesses to come to Broad in 2006, and we spent every penny we had to turn the abandoned post office into a beautiful office and gallery and shop from which we ship custom memorials all over the country, and we do it every day. The property being discussed was once a muffler shop, and it was in terrible condition, so I had a contract to purchase the property, and then I was approached by Loeb to buy it. I was assured they were going to use it as an office and a welcome center, and they would be leaving the green space. And as the property had a public alley running through it that I and 6 other businesses need to access to the back of our buildings, I wrote into the contract that the access to the back of my property cannot be blocked as it's a public alley. The alley has not been terminated. It's a public alley. I added this to the contract because I was warned that they had a habit of maybe not honoring agreements, so I had it put into the contract when we assigned it to Loeb. Not only was it not used as a welcome center or a leasing office, they've left it to rot. The canopy fell in, the roof collapsed, the door fell in, I've cut the grass and killed the weeds. They did with the property what they've done to every property on Broad Avenue. They left it to fall apart. And when the BOA made the gas station drawings public, I discovered that they intended to cut off the public alley and access to my building, which would have put me out of business. I was forced to file for an injunction to stop this from happening, and the case is still open. They changed the design multiple times to reconfigure in a way to give me and my neighbors access to a property, but each of those attempts have failed. All the drawings that they presented block our access. So the BOA should not make a determination on what's appropriate for that corner without even being given accurate drawings. They've changed them even as of today. What you're looking at was not presented to you until just now. They've not even gone to the trouble to see if what they're proposing is safe. They have traffic exiting onto a bike lane on the Broad Avenue. What they haven't considered is by the time a driver's line of sight is cleared in my building, one's car would already be in the bike lane. By the time you see if you're going to hit somebody, they've already been hit. So safety is not their concern. And they're planning on removing parking spaces to an area already short of parking. They're eliminating a handicap cut through on the Hamp line, which means handicapped folks have to walk down Broad Avenue just to reach the sidewalk. Traffic at this corner is already a nightmare. Yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, traffic was backed up halfway down Summer. We've got pictures and videos of multiple wrecks in the past months, and this will increase severely. They're telling you, in their presentation, they speak of places to park your bike and healthy food choices. Well, that's what they say, but what are they going to do? I mean, they have cars exiting into a bike lane, and they have the company, the gas station company. They also own a bunch of Checkers fast food stores. So if they're serving healthy food there, it will be for the first time. So they're telling you what you want to hear with no intention of following through with what they say. Broad and Binghamton now looks beautiful. Well, except for every property that Loeb owns. Every property on Broad Avenue is blighted, overgrown, and neglected. The south side of Broad Avenue is beautiful, and it conforms to the vision of the neighborhood. The north side is owned by Loeb, is overgrown and falling apart from decades of neglect. So I read that the Board of Adjustment must make, when their findings a fact, a variance request, that one of the BOA's guidance for findings is the requested variance will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of the Development Code and not injure the neighborhood or the general welfare. Loeb is attempting to shut off a public alley without permission, attempting to put my company out of business, eliminating parking, taking out handicap access, cutting off access to my neighbor's property, endangering cyclists, causing a traffic nightmare, and bringing a convenience store to an area already struggling as a food desert. Over 100 people have written to the BOA and asked you to please see these injuries. This injures the community's general welfare. So where do citizens go when large developers attack their businesses and homes and blight their neighborhoods? They come to you for help. So please listen to everyone begging you for your help and vote against yet another gas station and a convenience store. Thank you for your time. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the opposition? No questions. Thank you for your feedback. And Mr. Whitehead, can we move on? We have 5 minutes and 53 seconds left for opposition.
Well, that's perfect, because I believe our second of two speakers is Pat Brown. Ms. Brown, if you're with us, you're on.
I am here.
Ms. Brown, state your name and address for the record.
Pat Brown, 1524 East Moreland. I own a business on Broad Avenue.
Okay. And if you don't mind raising your hand, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right. Go ahead.
Thank you for hearing this, and I will provide additional overview of our concerns and then delve into some specifics following up on Mr. West's comments. I am representing the small business owners, property owners, and residents of Broad Avenue. And I can emphatically state that in the 12 years I have been a part of Broad Avenue, the goal of those of us who invested in the area was to decrease the auto orientation and increase the walkability, bikeability of the area. It was not to recruit a multi-pump gas station as our gateway. It was to reconnect the area south of Sam Cooper, an area that automobile use via Interstate 40 nearly destroyed. It's not to worsen the condition. If approved, the requested variance and subsequent use creates adverse impact to these plans. As Tom Jones recently stated in his Smart City blog, your decision today is a vote on whether the vision captured in Memphis 3.0 is more than empty words. This project is not context sensitive for Broad Avenue. In the staff report, and as Mr. West noted, there are more than 90 letters submitted in opposition, including comments from Community Lift and the Hyde Family Foundation, who have both invested heavily in Broad Avenue, the Hamp Line, and the surrounding Binghamton area. The overriding concern from these comments addresses this context. The proposed use and scale of the use does not fit. While the staff report notes the scale of the C-store building fits into a scale of other buildings in the area, and that the land adjacent to the property is used as commercial, it is not noted that the commercial use along Sam Cooper is all adapted reuse single-family homes. The character of this section of Sam Cooper maintains a residential feel. On this topic, I reference your meeting last month, where you evaluated a similar request brought forth by the owner of the theater property on Summer. This request specifically addressed prohibiting the less desirable use such as a gas station. If this use isn't desirable there, how can it be desirable? How can it be a desirable use for Broad Avenue in Binghamton in an area just 2 blocks away? Now, I do realize you must find on facts. Thus, I ask you to turn to page 48 of the staff report and review the first letter of opposition. This letter we submitted outlines our response based on the criteria found in section 9.22.6 of the UDC. First, the unusual characteristics and practical difficulties to develop the land do not exist, as this land is viable for single-family housing despite its unusual shape. We have provided you an image that shows 3 single-family homes can be accommodated on this property. What makes this land additionally attractive for core center housing is that approximately 100 yards from this area is a significant matter route and stop and a world-class bike route. Also, the TDOT land on the northwest corner of Sam Cooper and Hollywood is under pending contract in consideration for residential use. The southwest corner of the intersection is residential. The context is residential and Main Street commercial, not large-scale gas stations similar to one found on the interstate. On items A, 4, and 5, as previously mentioned, we strongly contend that approving the variance will create adverse impact to 3 neighborhood adopted plans. The neighborhood will be injured. While the staff report does cherry-pick a partial reference of the Broad Avenue Corridor Plan, it does not honor its overriding context of that plan, nor does it reference the 2 other adopted plans for the area, the Binghamton TIF and the Binghamton TIF Implementation Strategy Report. Putting new fuel tanks in the ground, reducing viable residential land, and adding to the auto orientation of this area adversely impacts stated goals to decrease environmentally contaminated properties, increase housing, especially for refugees and seniors, and to calm traffic along Sam Cooper and Hollywood. These goals are viable and fundable. Approving the variance substantially impairs the intent and purpose of these adopted plans. Added to this concern is creating the additional injury that Mr. West spoke to and the traffic concerns. If approved, this will be the third development use, including 600 apartments for this 3-block area. If you opt to approve this variance, we beg that a comprehensive traffic study of the entire area be completed before proceeding. Finally, item 6 states that the variance is not granted simply because by granting the variance, the property can be utilized more profitably. Given it's possible to develop the land under the current zoning designation, the question arises as to what other motive does the developer have but to allow the land to be utilized more profitably. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Are there any questions from the board of Ms. Brown? All right. Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, we have less than a minute on the opposition.
And I'm looking over to Mr. Penzis, and there are no other speakers in opposition.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay. All right. Now we're going back to our applicant. Mr. Jackson, you have a rebuttal. You actually have your full 11 minutes because you didn't use but a minute, if that.
Okay, very good. And I'm not going to address everything, but just a couple of things that I want to point out in particular.
Okay.
You know, the opposition was really in response at the very beginning when we submitted our application. We were under the impression that this new curb cut that was recently installed at the corner of Broad and Hollywood would remain, and that would be a constraint. And it was only after walking the site with city engineering that it was determined that curb cut is really an unsafe condition as it exists right now. Even in the way, even with the island there, it doesn't really work to create a safe condition for motorists exiting this site. Not only that, the truck deliveries can also, really traffic can flow through this site without any real control. And it was after really that we dived in to look at alternatives, and that's the plan that you see before you today, which really significantly reduces the continuous curb cuts along Hollywood and Broad. Going to great lengths to really decrease where traffic can enter this site. A right in, right out only on Sam Cooper actually helps to add a little relief to the congestion at the intersection. And the protected right in only on Hollywood ensures that cars and truck deliveries can no longer make a left out of the site onto that Hollywood street. So the deliveries will have to exit onto Sam Cooper Boulevard. And that's really a lot of the work we've been doing too, is projecting very conservative turn radiuses so there's no oversteering, working with TDOT to make sure that deliveries to the adjacent businesses can happen through this alley, going to great lengths to make sure that it will remain in operation, and making sure that those trucks, those large, these are 70, 80-foot trucks, can no longer exit onto Broad or Hollywood. They would be directed to Sam Cooper. So a lot of the work, and I'll also state that the exit on Broad Avenue now is a protected, elevated cycle track that has a series of stops. So the car, it's radius to keep traffic slow, and then the car will stop at the first sort of moment of the intersection for pedestrian traffic, and then it has to stop again in the middle of the island before finally being able to turn, make a right out. So it's a series of stops and a very slow progress to ensure the safety of motorists who may be exiting at that location. Use of texture and colors and to accent and make that pedestrian and bike space very clear is part of the plan. Signage, cycle path signage, also being very clear. All help to really ensure the safety, and the applicant is going to great lengths to do that with this concept. And further, moving the building up onto the street like it's done at that corner of Hollywood and Broad, really continuing the streetscape of the Broad Avenue and investigating the sort of historic context of those facades and designing here a masonry sort of post-industrial aesthetic building frontage to really tie that whole streetscape together. Again, we think that also helps to create a buffer for pedestrians and bicyclists on the HAMP line between the vehicular area and the cycle track. So that's what I wanted to point out for the safety of cyclists and pedestrians and motorists on this site.
Okay.
If there's any other questions, I can answer any other questions at this time.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Secretary, we've heard from opposition and we have heard rebuttal from the applicant, and we're now going to close the public hearing and have discussion with the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any discussion on the board?
I think we get a motion to approve, and then a second, and then we can discuss.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there a motion to approve docket number BOA 20-43 as conditioned by staff?
I move approval just to get it on the floor.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and second. Now we can open it up for discussion of the board. Is there any discussion?
This is Portia Skurlock. I've been really listening, and I know our position, as the Board of Adjustment is to look at the variances as presented, but the usage argument really has me thinking, and so I'd like to hear thoughts from other people on the board on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll speak. Mary Baker. Were you finished, Portia? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. I had just asked for other people, such as yourself, to input because, I looked at the arguments and everything before, and I know that our goal is just to focus on, the variance as questioned there. But, usage things do play a role, too. So I just wanted to discuss amongst ourselves.
May I speak, Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, Ms. Baker.
Thank you. I'm going to vote against this application, and there are a lot of reasons, but I'm just going to make it short. I think it's injurious to the neighborhood, which is a walking and bicycling district located on the HAMP line directly across from Overton Park. We just have very few neighborhoods like this, and I think we have to be very careful that we don't approve uses that are injurious to them. Vehicular access into and out of this site is completely inadequate, and I drove over there just to test it. This is probably a convenience store with gas pumps, is probably the most automobile-related use in existence. It's the most automobile-related use that I can think of, and I just think it makes it injurious to the neighborhood, and our standards do say specifically that whatever we approve shall not be injurious to the neighborhood. So I'm going to vote against this application. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Baker. Anyone else?
It's John Jackson.
Okay. Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair, I have a question for staff. It's my understanding in reading your report that what we are voting on is the allowance of the change to put the gas pumps and underground fuel storage tanks in the R6 area, period. And what we're not voting on, because it's permitted by right, is the place of the gas station and the CMU-1 location. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, Mr. Jackson, I hate to, I'm not going to disagree with Mr. Thomas, but I think the answer is a little more nuanced.
Okay.
Conditions of approval are typically, well, they're almost always on the same, they address things on the same site.
Someone please mute.
Okay, so the Board of Adjustment approves variances, and those variances have conditions of approval. Those conditions of approval need not be within the site, right? We often have off-site conditions. Maybe, this is probably extraordinary, but if you are developing a property that is just 100 or so feet from the nearest intersection, this body has every right to, for instance, require new curbs and gutters to be installed from the site in question up to the intersection. That's a good example of an off-site improvement, and that's permissible. Here we would have, what we have here is a use by right in one half of the site and a use variance on another half. The approval of the use variance on the other half can be conditioned to bleed into the other section of the site, if that makes sense. In other words, the whole site, both the part that is zoned wrong and the part that is zoned right, is up for consideration, if that's not too confusing of an answer.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, let me ask you this question then. If we did not approve this case, are they still permitted by right to construct the gas station on the CMU-1 property?
That's correct. Yes.
They are. Okay. Great.
But not as planned. You're welcome. As Mr. Thomas did point out, they'd have to change their site plan because obviously they have to remove the gas pumps from the residential portion, but they'd also have to remove some of those other variances. So it would have to be a significantly altered site plan, but a gas station could be utilized at this property, perhaps, because it'd have to be all squeezed up to the north part. But yeah.
If they could get it all to fit, is what basically what we're saying.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Great. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Jackson, will you finish with your questions?
I'm finished with that question, but I have, a statement to make with my fellow board members. Yeah, this is a very unusual situation. Broad Avenue for a very long period of time was not as we see it today, although it managed to hold on for many, many years and to make a remarkable comeback. It's a great story. The permitting by right of a gas station on CMU-1 is, of course, done by zoning in a UDC. And with what they're asking, in my opinion, does have a negative impact on the Broad Avenue corridor, in my mind. And not even if it wasn't in my mind, in the mind of the number of oppositions we have to this project. I'm really wrestling with whether to vote yes or no on this, just based on the opposition that's there from the community itself. Do I personally like it? I think it's a unique design. Does it address what the needs of the site are in somewhat a unique way, yes. But I was also struck by, in the package, the opposition and a alternate design concept by Ray Brown's design that showed some residential on this property. It's R-6. So I guess what I'm saying to you is this is a very tough decision. We've got a lot of people in the neighborhood against it. It's a unique design. Part of it's permitted by right. And I'm having a tough time wrestling with it. I'd like to hear what some of the other board members have to say about it. Thank you, Madam Chair. Vice Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson, I would have to say I agree with you and Ms. Baker. I'm kind of torn between the two, and it's kind of a catch-22 situation. My concern, of course, I sit with a lot of the opposition in the concern of the traffic and the, especially the access to the alleyway for the existing businesses that are there. We don't want to be a bad neighbor and, hamper them in their business, but at the same time, they do have a right to put it there. They just have to change their design. So I'm kind of torn either way, but I do empathize and sympathize with the opposition in their concerns regarding the automobile traffic there as well. Busy intersection, it is growing, but keeping in mind of the new development and the revitalization of the area was to be pedestrian friendly and bike friendly. So I'm like you, I'm concerned, but I'm just kind of leaning on the board members, but I think I know which way I'm going to go. In the sense of by right, they can put one there, they just have to develop it differently. So that's just my thoughts. Anyone else?
Yes, this is JT, and I agree with Mr. Jackson. The only thing I'm trying to visualize right now is if this gas station still came up by right, are we actually creating, a worst case scenario by having all the traffic come off of Hollywood and Broad? And by giving this variance, we are able to at least divert some of the traffic in and out on Sam Cooper, which, in my mind is going to be a much easier transition than to, push traffic up in Broad. But if we don't give this variance and they still move forward with the gas station, then the traffic will have to come in from Hollywood and Broad, which in my mind can create more problems. But then again, it would be a smaller gas station. So, this is definitely a tough decision.
Thank you, JT. Anyone else?
This is Portia Skurlock again. I'm leaning toward voting no, because while the design of the gas station is wonderful and a great creative solution, there was still the option of office space, because there is the transitioning of the Broad Avenue area, and there are few residences just west of Hollywood there too. So the plan with the bike riding and walkable space is to connect that part of the neighborhood to the rest of it versus cutting it off. So that thought. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Secretary, I guess we're ready for a roll call vote.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gerlach?
No.
Ms. Doss?
No.
Mr. Jackson?
No.
Mr. Malazri?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
No.
And Vice Chair Savage Towns?
No, I find that the standards of the UBC of 9.22.6 are not being met and would be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
That's one aye.
Sorry.
And 5 nays.
Okay, this does not pass. Thank you all for attending the meeting. And Mr. Secretary, if you don't mind calling the next case, and I think our chair is going to come back.
And as he comes back, we do have Mr. Ballard with us, so we can call out agenda item number 10, which is docket BOA 2084, located at 726 North Parkway. The applicants are, again, Monroe and Joanne Ballard. The use district is the MU Mixed Use District, and the variance is from 392H to allow a street-facing garage.
All right, thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is Mr. Ballard where he can speak to us real quick?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Ballard, will you go ahead and give your name and address for the record?
Yes, sir. My name is Monroe Ballard. I reside at 726 North Parkway, Memphis, Tennessee, 38105.
All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Whitehead, real quick, just making sure there's no opposition that's joined us. It's just Mr. Ballard, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So
I do have my mom on the line also, just so you'll know.
As long as if she wants to speak, we'll need to swear her in, but if it's just she's there, that's fine. So we were getting ready to vote on your case on consent, and it came up that, there's a pole and a culvert on the Manassas part of this property, and the question was whether or not a drive could go there. And I think some of the board members, that we don't know that we care if there's a drive there. We don't want there to be a drive on North Parkway, and we were going to possibly add a condition to the staff report that there would never be like a curb cut or a garage facing North Parkway, but we did not want to add that without making sure that was okay with you. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. You're just saying you don't want us backing out into North Parkway, right?
Yeah, we don't want North Parkway used as an access to this property.
Okay. I understand that. Yes, sir. We're looking for it on Manassas, right?
Okay, very good. With that done, is there anybody on the board that wants to actually hear the full case, or would we just want to add a friendly amendment that looks like would be okay with the applicant?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
As the body considers whether they want to ask any questions, I want to throw out a little monkey wrench that maybe will cause them to ask more questions. Okay. I'm looking on page 9 of the staff report, and there appears to be, at whatever time when the city widened North Parkway, they built a retaining wall at this property, and they cut the retaining wall and they cut the curb to create an apron on North Parkway. I'm pretty positive that's, what am I looking at here?
That is correct.
Okay, so that is looking at the site, correct, Mr. Thomas?
That is, yes. So that curb cut is technically on that site, like you said, done for the retaining wall, although I do not believe it's in use, and I do believe that most likely engineering would probably request it to be closed at some point.
Mr. Thomas, I have a question for you. This is at the northwest corner of North Parkway in Manassas?
Northeast corner.
Got you. Okay, so yes, we're looking at the site here from North Parkway. So I think, Mr. Chairman, if the body wants to really solidify that condition that y'all are considering, maybe you add some oomph to it and require the closure of this apron.
Okay.
Mr. May I?
Yeah, Ms. Baker.
And others, board members, may not agree with this, but my concern wasn't so much not even allowing them to have a driveway from North Parkway. My concern was a front-facing garage on North Parkway, because you can see it'd be right next to a house that's fronting North Parkway in the traditional way. The same really is true on Manassas. I think it would be better if we didn't have a front-facing garage at all. So, if this site could be accessed from North Parkway, and the driveway could then, the cars could come into the rear of a house facing Manassas, with the side to North Parkway, be okay, or even facing North Parkway, but not with a.
It would still have to be a cut on Manassas, on North Parkway, right?
Yeah, I personally don't mind there being a driveway on North Parkway. What my big concern was having a front-facing garage on North Parkway, and because it's just not that part of the city, the homes face the street, and I see the homes on both sides of this do face the street. So I'm just making the point that I don't mind the driveway on North Parkway. What I have a problem with is front-facing garage. I'm really not even all that crazy about a front-facing garage facing Manassas, because it's going to be right next to that house that doesn't have that condition. So,
would you like to construct what you think your condition would be, and then let's check with the applicant if that makes sense to them?
I guess my condition would be a front-facing garage shall not be permitted on North Parkway. However, driveway access can be taken from North Parkway.
Okay.
That would be my condition, because, he's got to get into the site some way, and
sure.
I don't think he can do it on the other side.
You're worried. Yeah, I understand. Okay. Is there any opposition from the board of that amendment, which is less onerous than what the applicant already agreed to?
Yeah, we may have just saved them a couple $1,000s.
Yeah. Hearing none, then we just then we'll add that to the conditions. Is there anything else that the board would like to discuss?
Tell me, explain what they're saying now. They couldn't have to go on.
Can I have some clarity on that? I don't understand what.
Yes, sir.
If we're not asking for anything on North Parkway, number one, and number two, we're trying. If you read through the application, it's a hardship because of my mom's age is that we're even coming to make sure that there's a garage, because she does not. I do not want her coming into the neighborhood open. Like she needs to go into
garage. So here's all we're saying today. Your site plan's fine like it is. With this condition, if you find it because the way Manassas is with that culvert and power pole, that you're not able to put your garage and driveway on Manassas, you could use that rear entrance on North Parkway. You just could not face the garage that way, so you'd have to turn the garage.
I understand now.
To do. So yeah, so we're just giving you we are giving you some options if you have to use North Parkway. You just can't face your garage that way.
I do understand now. Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for getting us to clarify it for you for sure. Any other comments for staff?
Ask one other question, because that power pole is partial on my land.
Ma'am, could you give your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, sir. Joanne Ballard, 286 Island Drive, apartment 108, Memphis, Tennessee, 38103.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then what was your question, Miss Ballard?
The power pole is a little on my lot.
Right.
So
yeah, just
is that something that's handled with the city, or is it handled with MLG&W? Because
there's a power pole there?
Yeah, it's actually not on the sidewalk. It's actually on the land itself. Like, it's actually up on the land. And I think the pole you all are referencing.
I would imagine that MLGW has an easement for it to be there, but I don't know for sure. But you could take it up with them if you need any sort of, that pole to be, they will occasionally move poles, but that's nothing that we can really do on our board.
I'll just tell them you told them to move it.
Well, let me just tell you, between you and MLGW, we'll see who gets that done.
MLGW does not have a board of adjustment.
Yeah.
Right.
Ask the brewery and in Uptown what they think about moving power poles. So
okay. You win.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to make sure the garage can come off of North Manassas.
We don't have a problem with that, Miss Ballard, at all. But if you had to put it on North Parkway, you can.
He said if we can fit it there, Mama, with the pole, it'll be fine. And if it can't, they're giving us permission to put it in the back of the house as long as it's not facing North Parkway.
Okay.
So you can still drive in off of North Parkway and get into the garage. So there's already an easement cut there anyway.
Right. Okay. Very good. With that, I would like to see if any member of the board would give us a motion to approve item number 10 as conditioned by staff and with the friendly amended condition that Ms. Baker stated before relating to the front load garage not facing North Parkway.
John Jackson, so moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Vice Chair, second.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Whitehead, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Vice Chair Savage Towns.
Standards of the UDC of 9.2246 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Ms. Gerlach.
Yes.
Ms. Baker.
Yes.
Mr. Jackson.
Yes.
Ms. Doss.
Yes.
Mr. Malazri.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That's 7 ayes.
All right, very good. The case number, agenda item 10, has been approved. Thank you very much, and thank you, Ms. Baker, for clarifying that. That's helpful to the applicant. Mr. Whitehead, do we have any further announcements today?
No, sir.
All right, we are hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we will talk to you people